So I was in the middle of reading one of my books, and I thought, you know, one of y'all might need to hear this. So this is from The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health by by Rita Walker. Okay. Shifting an anxious perspective toward positive change. As humans, we find ways to deal with life's adversities the best way that we can. We may have been in a car accident, and as a result, you prefer not to drive. You may actually be scared to drive, but do not tell anyone of your fear. You just refuse to drive. Alternatively, you can begin to shift your perspective in these ways. First, recognize your challenge for what it is, a challenge to be overcome. Unless you have a hidden superpower, you cannot change the things that happened in the past. You can decide to change today, or you could decide not to change at all. Either way, you are making a decision. If you tell yourself that your fear of something like driving signifies that you are crazy, then you have put undue pressure on yourself. This pressure will make your situation harder to get out from under. Being crazy is yet another hurdle that you have to overcome, as if you do not have enough to do already. If you think of the problem as something that is not helpful, you put yourself on the path to creating solutions that are more likely attainable. When depression sneaks in, imagine an African American mother who works full time and is very active in her community. At work, she is a supervisor who is responsible for multiple employees and their difficult personalities. She's a good-hearted person who takes it all in stride. At home, she cooks meals, keeps the house clean, makes sure that the children, if she has children, do their homework. She also makes sure that they get their numerous extracurricular activities throughout the academic year, including sports on Saturdays. She's in church every Sunday and sometimes volunteers with one of the ministries. In the community, she holds office in two civic organizations. Dang. As you might imagine, she is tired, chronically stressed and sleep deprived, but she lies awake at night for hours because she cannot fall asleep. She oftentimes has problems concentrating at work and no longer knows what gives her joy. When she stops to think, she feels tearful and sometimes wants to run away from it all. She could be depressed. She could also be managing a tremendous amount of anxiety, though she does an impressive job of keeping everything together for appearances. The effort in doing so only adds to her stress. Her first step is to talk to someone who can diagnose the problem. Has it been so long that you got joy out of life that you don't even remember what you enjoy? In general, depression is low mood or disinterest in things that were interesting at one time, but it does not end there. Based on our usual definitions, you might be sad or irritable and also sleep 10 hours a day, overeat, and have thoughts of suicide. Someone you know could sleep relatively little, lose 18 pounds in 2 months, and never consider suicide, but feel on the inside that life is worthless. Because life just happens to all of us, if you have a few hours or a couple of days when these types of feelings or experiences happen, you would not meet the threshold for depression. However, if it goes on for weeks or months or years, it could be depression. Notice that I say it could be depression. You may want to get a thorough physical exam that includes a thyroid check to rule out health problems. Your thyroid is a gland that controls how your body metabolizes food that you eat. When your thyroid underperforms, you may feel tired and depressed, with generally low energy and prefer to sleep all the time. These are thyroid problems that can cause or mimic depression. Your depression is not your depression is not Becky's depression. What inspired me to earn a PhD is the assumption in mainstream psychology that black people's depression looks the same as that of white people. Many African Americans, or at least the ones who identify as African American, assume that black people do things differently, see things differently, feel things differently, and even say things differently than white people do. For anyone to assume that psychology is the same regardless of race is to operate from a place of privilege. Those who do not see race presume that there is no reality that exists outside of their own. My work is about bringing attention to our mental health realities. Depression can look different because not everyone has the same symptoms, even within racial or ethnic groups, but also because of our cultural lenses. I like the labels that Dr. F.M. Baker introduced in 2001 to describe the experience of depression. He described the detached long sufferer who proclaims that faith in God is the answer to all the John Henry doers, whose health is compromised by overworking but nevertheless persist in overworking. Both are labels to which I can relate for depressed African Americans. The data-supported research suggests that though a black person and a white person might seem to have the same level of depression symptoms, the black person will not acknowledge thoughts of suicide and may be more likely to acknowledge other depression symptoms like sleep problems. Even still, they may also get out of bed and go to work every day and not miss a day for 40 years. They might not feel depressed, but that does not mean that the depression is not there. It only means that the depression profile is different and thus more likely to fly under the radar. Unfortunately, your physician may not be familiar with preliminary research that describes potential depression profiles for black people. Though I believe there to be a value in the profiles, much more research is needed to solidify them. Understanding confusing statistics. If you have ever taken it upon yourself to read about depression statistics, or if you have ever been in an audience where someone was talking about depression statistics, you may have heard some conflicting information. On one hand, black people are more likely than white people to report or say that they have symptoms of depression. At the same time, black people are less likely to meet the criteria for a depression diagnosis. How can both be true? For you to meet criteria for a depression diagnosis, you have to endorse certain symptoms. If you do not endorse these symptoms, the interviewer does not check the box. For depression, the interviewer does not check the box for depression. Okay, yeah. In the end, you can endorse a number of symptoms and to a high degree, but if you do not endorse the right symptoms, then you do not meet the criteria no matter how many of the other symptoms were checked and for how long they have been experienced. Whether or not we have more or less depression is less important than the fact that time we seek to help. Our symptoms tend to be unnecessarily debilitating compared to white women and men. Our symptoms tend to be more severe and less amenable, A-M-E-N-A-B-L-E, to intervention because we wait so long to get help. We must stop waiting until things are so bad off that they are irreversible. Alright, I'm going to stop at 15 just like at the other two videos. Revisiting diabetes and depression. I mentioned in chapter 3 that serious health conditions like diabetes are further complicated by poor psychological fortitude. A depressed person may experience low mood or disinterest in life. They may be irritable, sleep excessively, have a tendency to overeat, and hide thoughts of taking their life. Imagine having both symptoms of depression and type 2 diabetes to manage. The consequences of mismanaging them, however, are that you lose your sight, end up with an amputated limb, or worse. It may be hard to think about health together with psychological fortitude, but what if the health problems that run in the family could be interrupted if your psychological problems were addressed? When I talk to people about this, everyone agrees that it makes sense that people with health problems are prone to depression. What you may not know is that people who are diagnosed with diabetes are twice as likely as those not diagnosed with diabetes to be depressed. Type 2 diabetes is a leading cause of death among African Americans. Since there isn't mental health professional set up adjacent to most endocrinologist offices in the United States, you will have to be patient yet proactive on behalf of yourself and loved ones. Consider what people diagnosed with diabetes are expected to be able to do while depressed. It seems unreasonable that you would expect your uncle to exercise regularly, avoid his favorite pound cake, remember medication each day. Keep in mind that you may have a difficult time exercising and eating healthy, even with serious psychological fortitude limitations. Nevertheless, this is what is expected of people who manage diabetes. I have not investigated depression and other serious health concerns, but I have no doubt that you can apply the depression to any condition that requires management. Struggles in childhood affect how your body copes now in your adult life. If you have persistently low psychological fortitude, I suspect that you have had a profoundly troubling life challenge. a challenge that you did not have the resources at the time to manage. This is why abuse and neglect that happen in childhood have so much impact for the remainder of our lives. Your childhood was the most vulnerable stage of your life because you did not have the maturity to understand what was happening to or around you. So it is important for you to get your psychological fortitude up so you can be watchful of your children and help them deal with adversity. According to experts, childhood adversity compromises how the body responds to stress. If not neutralized by a supportive environment, childhood adversity can lead to alcoholism, heart disease, anxiety, depression, and all kinds of other problems in adulthood. If you were abused or neglected as a child, you are at risk for a poorer quality of life than those who experience no adversity, though you may not think of yourself as at risk. Bad things can happen throughout life, but childhood is vulnerable even if you were mature for your age. Again, to stop damaging cycles, be vigilant in protecting your loved ones. Stress is not just in your head, it harms your whole being. You may have reached a stage of life wherein your physician is recommending extra tests because you have complained of chest pain or some other troublesome ache. Once the tests are completed and the physician rules out everything that you could be tested for, he says, "Have you been under a lot of stress?" And then you say, well, really, it says that you chuckle, and what you really want to say is, "You're kidding, right? Don't I look like I've been under a lot of stress? What do you mean by stress?" The last thought is the funniest because you wonder when the time was that you were not under stress. You think it's funny because you wonder when was the last time that you were not under a lot of stress. When the doctor asks about stress, it seems to be a throwaway category. If there is no physical cause, it must be in your head. But the stress question is a very real one. Your physician is not suggesting that you are crazy. Instead, he is suggesting that you may want to take inventory of the stressors in your life and how you're managing them. When you do not have what you need to appropriately manage your stress, your body does what it can to manage the stress threats for you, which hurts your overall physical health. Ain't that a bit? Be alert to misdiagnosis. While anxiety and depression are the most commonly occurring threats to psychological fortitude, they are not the most common conditions people think about when they think of mental illness. Most people are thinking about more severe conditions like schizophrenia, whereby the individual has lost touch with reality. A person with schizophrenia may hear voices or see things that are not there. They can be excessively paranoid. These types of problems are specifically referred to as psychosis. A psychosis can be symptoms of severe depression, though not often. Again, talking to an expert can help. One roadblock in the process of gaining information about your psychological fortitude is misdiagnosis. There are studies that show that you as a black person are more likely to be misdiagnosed than your white peer. Preliminary studies suggest that because of differences in how our symptoms show up, mental health professionals are less equipped to identify our anxiety and depression. The problem with misdiagnosis is that certain problems such as bipolar disorder can be treated more efficiently, and effectively, and other problems such as schizophrenia have a poorer prognosis. There has been some research that show that black people are generally more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia than with bipolar disorder, a type of depression. Some people know bipolar disorder as maniac depression because the individual seems to cycle from very high mood to very low mood. That may seem crazy and erratic, but it is not the same as the behavior that we see from someone who suffers from schizophrenia. Bipolar disorder is treated with medication, and the individual can usually live a full and productive life. People who have severe schizophrenia will often require more assistance as they are unable to take care of themselves. I recall a client case that occurred when I was in my doctoral training program. As background, when psychologists do not know what the diagnosis is, but there is a preliminary information, we first generate possible diagnosis to rule out. In this example, a fellow doctoral student indicated that he needed to rule out schizophrenia for an African American male client. When I asked my classmate why he suggested schizophrenia, he referred to the manner in which the gentleman responded to routine series of questions. He observed that the man was describing strange experiences and seemingly paranoid thoughts that people are out to get him, or perhaps seeing things that other people did not see. I had overheard this client in the waiting room over a period of time as I worked in an office nearby. To the cultural divide that led the classmates to suggest schizophrenia was clear to me. Unfortunately, observations like this can happen when there is a limited guidance for how to interpret black folks' behavior and beliefs. The field of psychology may not be able to anticipate the ways in which a psychological symptom has showed up differently for black adults compared to white adults. But by no fault of our own, black people can seem more paranoid and crazier than people from other racial groups. This paranoia can factor into misdiagnosis because we are perceived as being out of touch with reality. I look forward to the day when cultural competence is the enforced rule and not the exception. Until that day comes, you will need to be proactive in getting the assistance that you need for yourself and for your family. Oh, dang, 16. All right, I'm calling it a day.